develop it as an industry or industries. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction to the panel. This is where I always get my lap's Catholic, so I have to cross myself to know my left and right, so left. On the panel, I'm just going to introduce them and then we'll come back to through the panel. On my left is Bryony Williams, who's a singer-songwriter. On her left, I'm just going to go down now, I can't do it, is Lara Binion, who, like you know from too many things, but BMC, I think you're going to be talking about today. I admitted to I'm going to try it, Namiwa, and I just have a problem saying names, so I'm going to call Namiwa Nams, so I don't trip over, and I've apologised, and we've agreed that. So Nams is a singer-songwriter. You do a lot of work around women in music as well. Nick Reed is the CEO of the Town Hall and Symphony Hall, and then we have Adam Shelton, who's owner of Artium Cafe in Corporation Street. That's right. So what I want to do as well is make this panel as much about you as the people speaking here, and no disrespect to people during the day, but oftentimes the panelists speak and then the conversation ends, and it's much more interesting if you throw in and chuck in or add comments or suggestions or propagation. So at any point, just shout out or stick your hand up, and we'll get you to talk as well, because this is so much more about a two-way thing. So I asked the panel last night, and some of them, there's been a little bit of change, so apologies if people didn't get the emails and I'm springing this on them. But I just wanted, as a way of starting the discussion, was to give us one or two, what they consider to be the strengths of music activity in Birmingham, and one or two weaknesses, and then conversely perhaps one of the challenges, but also and most importantly for today, what are the opportunities of making music, consuming music in Birmingham. So Bryony, you're the nearest to me, so off you go.
So as Jez introduced me, singer-songwriter primarily, so I'm probably, most of the things I'm going to say are probably going to come from that angle. Is it on? It's on. Okay, cool. So a strength, thank you. A strength for me in the terms of maybe like live industries really, is that there's lots of music here in Birmingham. I don't think anyone can argue that. From a range of genres, there's always a lot going on. Like I'm in a specific circle, which is probably just like indie rock, indie pop, and yeah, and like in the cultural hubs, which I regard in Birmingham, such as like the Sunflower Lounge, Heron Hounds, and more, which is all coming up with like independent stores and stuff. Yeah, I think everyone's quite willing, really. Everyone's kind of got a positive attitude. Hopefully. A weakness, I would say, is maybe the...
Just say it.
I'm thinking. Maybe in regards to that, maybe the isolation between the genres here in Birmingham. Like I said, like my circle is a specific circle, but I'm very open-minded as a person. However, like again, like I don't really connect with any grime or R&B or heavy rock, essentially, although I used to be a heavy rocker. And I kind of neglect that. So maybe that is a gap in the mind in the gap.
Mind in the gap.
And that's it.
So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, Jess.
Yeah. SWOT.
You fit all the categories.
I do.
Yeah. Strengths.
What does me?
It's alright.
Yeah.
We got
I'll get you back later, I don't mind.
Strengths. Or one strength.
In your own time.
If you ever go, just it's honestly whatever comes into your head.
Okay, I'm gonna go cliched and I'm gonna say diversity, but I mean diversity in every sense. I mean musically, socially, artistically, we have it. Okay. Weaknesses. We are too mired in the past.
That's a music historian.
Yeah. Opportunities. Opportunities, I would say, are boundless, endless. But in particular, going on today, we have the opportunity to build on Pivotal Chris Rogers, who I introduced earlier, who's done a lot of work around Pivotal, has got a 5-year plan, and you can only imagine where this conference, this event can be in 5 years' time in terms of scale, size, scope, and reach. And then threats. I don't see any threats.
Challenges.
Challenges. Cliched again, but our local government.
Nams?
Yeah, strengths. I'm also an artist, songwriter, a creative producer in lots of different areas in terms of developing other people's careers. So I'm mainly going to just talk from an artistic perspective as a songwriter, performer. And I think the strengths are the scene itself. Like, there is a mix of these two responses. There's a lot of diversity, but also there's a lot of talent as well. I think there's a lot of artists giving real experiences, making real music about their lived experiences, about excuse me, things that they've seen. It's real music. You know, it's not all fake, basically, or all too in the pop style. I feel like from the ground up, you're feeling like I said, the real experiences. You're seeing the artists go through their breakup and then write about it, or you're seeing the artists go through whatever they're going through and then write about it, and it turns into a vibe in spaces that are cool. Weakness. I genuinely believe that there's a lack of belief. Like, I think, like, it's all good people saying, like, oh yeah, she's talented, or oh yeah, he's talented, or they've got skills, or they've got that. But do they actually believe to the point where they would, like, invest in the journey of that specific artist the way that it's needed for them to pop off in that sense? So I think, yeah, there's a lack of that belief, generally speaking. And I think that kind of crosses over from the artist trying to approach institutions to get put on, or the artist trying to approach people to collaborate. I think sometimes that lack of belief or this preconceived idea of what should be happening stops things from happening. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool.
Thank you. Hello. Strengths, well, it's here in this room. You know, where can you come and find, you know, all this stuff that's happening, you know, in the cracks? You know, where would you go and find people who are promoting Turkish club nights, you know, and listening sessions and all that kind of, that grist that makes for a really lively music scene. I think the weakness is probably the position that music holds in the city, particularly in the sense of its recognition as being an important economic driver for the city. As someone who worked in Manchester for 10 years and grew up going to gigs in Birmingham, you know, when everything was black and white, went away, you know, worked in Manchester for 10 years, and Birmingham's has got this kind of chip on its shoulder about Manchester, but that is a city that's got its nighttime economy relationship in terms of legislation, licensing. It's upped its game about that being an important drive for the city, and I think Birmingham needs to do that better.
So I think that a lot of people in Birmingham that are actually kind of, that don't venture out yet with their musical careers are quite quick to say that, you know, that they're quite quick to put it down, but, you know, just to sort of, you know, give another angle on that as someone who's lucky enough to travel around the world as a DJ. You know, you get people, what I found is a massive shift in people actually acknowledging Birmingham worldwide. I found, like, maybe up until about 5 years ago, that you could go somewhere and people would, you know, they wouldn't know anything about Birmingham, they wouldn't know anything about the parties, they wouldn't know anything about the DJs, whatever. You know, and I found a massive shift in the last, particularly in the last few years, that you can go places now, whether it's Berlin or Brazil, whatever, that people really know, actually, they know about the city, they know about the parties, and I think that there is so much good stuff coming from here, and, you know, I think it is actually a lot more acknowledged than people would like to think, and you've seen it so much over the years where people are always really quick to oh God, Birmingham, it's not what it could be or whatever. But I actually disagree. I think it's thriving, and I think it's only going to carry on to do so more. And I just think that that's something that people should take on board. I know it's hard to think that when you're a musician that's up and coming, and you may be just doing a few gigs to get yourself out there, but it is very well acknowledged, and I feel that is going on. Challenges, I would agree with Bryony. Yeah. That the cross the genres are crossing over very well. I think that there's these things can cross over so well with each other, and they're just not. And I think the only way to do that, again, what Lyle was saying, is through events like this. And I think that there should be more bigger artists that are sort of getting involved with events like this, and then letting the younger up and coming artist, or the up and coming artist, whatever, sort of know that they're getting the support, not just from like the education system and things like that you're doing today, but actually big artists believing in the city. And I think that's a massive lack of that. So that's, I think, is a challenge for the city, but something that can be achieved, definitely.
Okay, I'm going to park those responses, and we can come back to more. You've got questions, hold them just for a second, because the previous panel, particularly with some of education, veered off into what can happen, what can the city do, or what can people in the city do to sort of regenerate music activity. So I wanted to turn to Lyle and ask you just to talk a bit about the work that you've been doing over the last 2 years on the Birmingham Music Coalition, which might go to answer some of those questions earlier, and also actually might talk about some of the things that people have identified as both opportunities and challenges and strengths.
Okay, I'll try and summarise this. So, the Birmingham Music Coalition is a new industry body that has been born out of countless conversations with countless music industry professionals and musicians across the city, across the region, and across the UK, to do with how the music industry is valued and the opportunities that exist to improve it, to grow it, to develop it. It's essentially an industry body that comprises at the moment of up to about 35 members, all from independent music businesses, with the exception of some academics. And the idea is that it follows roughly the model of organisations like Generator North East, like the Birmingham Music Commission, which is bringing together people that have a serious vested interest in the music industry and the growth of that within their city and their region. These are people that have, really their blood, sweat and tears on their businesses. They've mortgaged in order to keep their businesses afloat. They've plundered their family savings. They really are. They're not publicly funded, or they're not subsidised, or at least that doesn't constitute the main income for their business. These can be studios, they can be venues, they can be singer-songwriters, they can be vinyl cutting businesses, they can really be from any part of the chain. At the moment, we're working with venues, promoters, artists, labels, academics, journalists, and a couple of others. The ethos for Birmingham Music Coalition is to essentially push for more investment in music in Birmingham, is to signpost, is to influence policy, is to take heed of the issues that are affecting the industry on a regional level and try and affect change. But it's also to join the dots up between the very many practitioners, people doing great things, amazing things in our city. It's effectively for positive change. So today's panels that have been in this room have all been curated under the banner of the Birmingham Music Coalition, and that's the capacity that I've been acting in supporting Chris Rogers, who's been putting together Pivotal. And yeah, we've got a way to go in terms of launching and and getting out there, but we do have a number of very high level strategic partnerships, and it can only be a positive thing for the city.
Has anyone got any sort of thoughts, initial thoughts, questions, or comments they want to make about that? You don't have to, but you can just listen to us drone on for the next 30 minutes.
Can I just get a show of hands? Do people generally understand what that was about? Because I've waffled a little bit. Well, all right. Those that don't, any particular part of it didn't make sense?
Well, let me ask you a question about actually the panel about that, and some of you might be more versed in I think in the last panel, it was mentioned about how screen and film in both the city and the region, manages to attract both investment and levels of subsidy to able to pay for a film officer, for example, or to talk to people like Stephen Knight about bringing a studio here. Would it be fair to say that in the city in Birmingham there hasn't been a sort of a coherent strategic voice? Is it the music industry's own fault as why those things haven't taken place? Nick, you mentioned about the city agencies and economic drivers. Can you level that accusation at that individuals, or is that is this needed?
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, the example of film came up this morning. I think part of the challenge is this perception that music, particularly popular music in all its forms, I'm trying to think of a catch-all, is in essence something which doesn't require subsidy or infrastructure or any of the, it's this kind of outlaw maverick pursuit that sits, it's got its own natural free market, if you like, and therefore it doesn't get that's the point I was trying to make in my, in what do I see as the weakness, is it doesn't seem to have the same currency as other industries, and I think that's a structural challenge, and it needs it needs Ian Ward at the council. It needs the growth company to recognise the importance of this nighttime economy. It's a bit of a cliche, that expression, but it's a catch-all to the city's future, because if you're trying to attract people to around my venue, there's 6,000 new jobs coming into the city around Centenary Square. When HS2 gets off the ground, there's going to be lots more people moving into the city there. They're all going to drive this nighttime economy, and it needs to have higher visibility in the kind of civic language.
Did you come back?
I absolutely agree, Nick, and I think that I've hit a wall today, which I was waffling a little bit on that, but I'm thinking through and listening to Nick. I think we have an incredible story to tell about the music industry here in Birmingham. There is a lot going on here in every corner, from so many different artists and producers, and that story has been told in some degrees, whether it's the Home of Metal project, which internationally has positioned Birmingham as the birthplace of heavy metal, and they did an absolutely fantastic job at it. I think that grime has already put Birmingham on the map. We've had Steel Pulse and plenty of other bands that have put us on the map for reggae. There's no questioning that we've got the credentials, we've got the kudos, we've got the history. I think it's about joining up the heritage with the present, so the past, the present, and the future, and looking ahead. And actually being a bit bolshy about it, and being a bit... I was on an Eventbrite panel at the Air and Hands a couple of months ago, and one of the things that came up in the discussion was that younger Brummies, so say early 20s, felt like they had a strong sense of pride and cultural identity, whereas perhaps a few generations on, you've still got this self-deprecating Brummie thing where you really don't like to shout about what's going on in the city, or, oh, it's all right, it's fine. But actually, there's a new sense of pride. And I think that is, like a lot of the football clubs did for Manchester, and a lot of the younger grime artists that are coming through now, or producers, they are instilling a new sense of civic pride. So, where am I going with all of this, Jez?
No idea.
You're supposed to be chairing and steering this. It's a really exciting time, as Nick outlined, for a number of reasons. I think HS2 is just going to blow the game open in terms of the music industry, particularly because soaring costs of rent in the capital, this notion of decentralisation and regionalisation. Also, it's going to be quicker to get from Birmingham to London than it is from East London to West London. The amount of music industry opportunities, it's so ripe for the taking in industry terms. So it's a good time. It's a good time to have a music coalition. The end.
Well, let me push the panel then, and please do shout out if you've got provocations and go for it.
I think it was really interesting what you said just about HS2 kind of bringing a push to Birmingham. I think that's very true, but I still feel as kind of a younger person in the city involved in music, it would be so much better if we could get our act together before it arrives.
Yeah, I agree.
And so when people come into the city from London or from Manchester, from whatever area of the country they're coming from, we can go, right, you're in Birmingham for the night. This is
Jack,
where
I'm fully behind you. Yeah,
these are the venues that do this. That's where you need to go for funk, reggae, whatever it is that you want to go and do.
Yeah.
I'm going to just, Ronnie, you were nodding there. Do you want to say something?
Well, I totally agree. Like, when does HS2 finish?
2023.
Predicted.
Oh,
Let's
26.
26. So it's probably
Probably
2030
2030,
in
yeah.
realistic.
You won't be
I
in.
did. But I agree with what you say. I mean, what, 26, like 10 years. Like we've got 10 years, like grout to be getting on with. And I like what you say. Like with outsiders coming in. Like for me, I've known Birmingham probably, let's say, 5 years roughly. I'm from Wolverhampton, so obviously not too far. And so before coming to uni, I already kind of grasped a bit of like, the different sections of Birmingham, like the Joy Recorder, Digbeth, City Centre, etc. And I'm still like learning about Birmingham. I'm still discovering new places. So for an outsider to come in, even for like a week or less than that, and to not really be easily navigated, as in like, their interests and hobbies, but not even knowing where to look, I think that's probably something we should like look at. Really.
Can I come in? Yeah.
And it strikes me off the back of what you were saying there about kind of getting our act together for Birmingham as a music city. It strikes me a big part of that is actually about having a kind of a compelling narrative about what music in Birmingham is, right? Kind of when we talk about Manchester, when we talk about other cities, there's a kind of a citywide narrative about what Manchester is as a music or a cultural city. So I wonder if any of the panel, or even just the panel, each of you could kind of maybe give me or give us a sense of what you think the narrative should be about what is music in Birmingham.
My concern would be who creates that narrative and who signs it off.
What
Because
are
you
your
could say
narratives? So like, we've got a range of people here.
Okay.
So what are the different narratives that people have? That's how
Oh.
the conversation starts.
Okay, well, this is a bit of a cliche, but I do roll it out a bit. But when I'm asked to define the sound of Birmingham, which often helps with producing a narrative, is that there isn't a sound of Birmingham. There isn't one sound that defines it. There are many sounds, and that is Birmingham. You look at we've had so many different waves of different popular music over the years. We've had so many collaborations and incredible cross-genre projects. That's the narrative for me.
I actually think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, totally. I applaud it. Yeah, I welcome it.
You have Manchester keeps popping up, but it's like Manchester with the electronic music scene. Yeah, everyone knows about the Hacienda, everyone knows about whatever. It's like Birmingham. It doesn't have to have that. I don't believe. I would agree with Lord. It's just its diversity makes it what it is. But I think it's about sort of just gelling that together. I think there's a serious lack of events that are shouting about that. If I'm honest with you as well, everyone's sort of doing their own little things, but there doesn't seem to be any, say festival doesn't have to be tens of thousands of people. Just really nice small, sort of events that are showing the city's creative culture, and I think that for me is something that's really lacking behind. Just to.
Can I ask the panel? Can I change? Because I think this theme pops up all the time about you don't shout enough about it. We need to signpost more. Well, actually, I think sometimes you need to move beyond that. So I want to push you a little bit about the BMC in particular, as artists and as producers and as venue hosts. you know, the role of policy, because I think what we're talking about is policy rather than just the messages about this band's come from here and this is what's going on. So how would you see, or would you imagine, you know, this idea about minding the gap, the role of policy plays? Should it play any role? So what should the role of the BMC be? Should it be just, okay, look, all this great stuff's going on, or should it actually look at the fabric and the infrastructure, as Nick has mentioned, about the city, about policy, about transport, about licensing? Now, the venue that we're in has been under threat numerous times because of developers. Should it be about the nighttime economy, about, you know, safety? Should it be? So there's much more than just the things that we're talking about, and I'd like to ask all the panel for that.
Do you have that in another city out of interest that you're aware of?
You do, yeah. So there's a big move. There's a big thing called music cities, started by Shane Shapiro at Sound Diplomacy. Manchester have just taken it on. Andy Burnham through the mayor's office. Liverpool have just taken it on through their mayor. Cardiff are doing some stuff around live. Internationally, there's Berlin, Melbourne, Seattle. So there are these, Bogota, there are these nodes or cities that are starting to think, well, music's not just the things that we play or, you know, the gigs that we go to see. It's actually much more than that. It's intrinsic within the city's development, you know, whether that be, as I say, for licensing or transport. So it's that I'm trying to get to push you all to think about as I say, as artists. You know, you might think it has nothing to do with me, or as producers, or as venues, or as someone who actually is travelling around. You know, how easy is it for you to be able to go to the cities and then bring DJs back, and you know, the infrastructure, the support there really.
Look, as project lead for Birmingham Music Coalition, everything that you've highlighted there has been brought up by the various members of the coalition. Licensing, transport, cultural policy, public subsidy, safety. You know, you can drill it down to the most basic of municipal responsibilities. And absolutely, like any industry, we should be influencing policy in the same way that any business community or any industry would work to lobby and influence policy. I think that's a given, and what Birmingham's music community hasn't done in the past is got together and actually mobilised and used the weight in numbers and the value. You know, I haven't referenced it yet, but the value of this group, the music coalition, the businesses contained within, is £7 to £10 million worth of music tourism. That's not a figure to be sniffed at, certainly from the city council. And then when you count the wider music community, there's a lot of economic clouds at risk here. And I think an important thing is, unfortunately, as much as Adam agreed with me about how this narrative of the city, there are certain parts of local and central government and business community that need to know the blunt end of the stats. They need to have something, a very basic narrative, in order to be able to sell the city to visitors, business visitors, leisure visitors. So the music industry needs to jump through some hoops. The music community and industry in Birmingham needs to jump through some hoops in order to meet some of the criteria, in order to unlock funding, and in order to increase that intrinsic value of music. The regional authorities and agencies also need to adapt and understand the intrinsic value that lies within. So, you know, there's a bit of a meeting in the middle, I think, here, and everything you've listed would be absolutely top of the agenda.
I'll come back to that. Nancy,
Yeah, I think, can I just ask how many artists are actually in the room? Actually, let's count it, because there's not a lot of us. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A few on this side that I didn't count. Okay, so maybe there's like a third of the room that is actually an artist, and I think that should be the main point of the conversation, because although we're saying there's lots of different elements to how music as a whole will impact the city, like you said, through transport links, through other different areas, through venues, it can all connects, it's all intertwined. But the reality of it is that what the artist is creating and what the artist is saying and doing is the most important thing, because it all derives from that. So I think the development and the core development that needs to happen is about giving artists the space to explore, to collaborate across genres, to have an institution or a setup that allows us to make creative mistakes, puts us in front of PRS, puts us in front of the MU, puts us in front of whatever it is that we need to, these funding pots.
That happens, it's happening more than it ever has, but what happens is when you get put on a scheme, or when you get put in front of a funder, what do you do with it then? Because there's no one in the city that can help you doing that.
But I still think that's part of the development, because as an artist, like I've done development programs in Birmingham. I've tried, knocked on doors for promoters, and when they've said no to me, I just thought, oh, fuck it, I'm going to put on my own night, and I put on my own EP launch, and I've done that twice. I'm doing it again on the 5th of December at the Hare and Hounds. It's not an EP launch, it's a headline show. But, you know, you have to do these things, you have to innovate, you have to enterprise, you have to put it on yourself. And obviously there are people that want to help, and there are institutions that are, I'm not ignoring it and saying that they're not there, but I think that should be the focus on developing the art, developing the music, making the hits, and they should come out of one channel which highlights, or not necessarily one channel, but it should come out of a strong Birmingham-driven channel that then affects everything else, and it should always start from the art. I think conversations like this, and because the industry is developed, and because there is £7 to £10 million worth of people and networks and net worth within us, I think sometimes it's easy to start talking about that, or to start talking about the venue, or our sales, or our this or that, but actually it's about the art. And I think as long as that's good, as long as it's impactful, it's music that you live with for years. It's not like a tune you're only going to live with for a couple months. Like the legends you've been listing, people are still living with their music right now. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's obviously a big part of it. So for me, that's what it is. It's about the art.
So what you'd advocate an artist development agency, or?
I think that's a good idea. I think, you know, to have someone that's, you know, if you're you know, at a point where, you know, you're making a record or a track or whatever, you know, to a lot of people that have not got the confidence maybe to take it into a record shop, maybe they've got a little test press or something, or, you know, or to approach labels, or to even have the contact for that, you know, to have someone to sort of like bridge that gap. I think that's a really important thing, and I don't feel like that's going on in the city so much. I mean, for example, in our record shop, I mean, you know, we've been open since April now, and we've had 2 people that have come to us with, like, you know, test presses of things they're doing, which is pretty weak. You know, it's like, you know, it should be loads of people in the city. We said when we opened we're going to have a section of Birmingham labels. We're building it, but it's small. You know, and I would love to see that to be more. You know, but I've been a little bit surprised that there's not been more people dropping in music, and it'd be nice if there's someone to help artists out with that, to give them the confidence to do that as well, I think.
See, I'm funnily not surprised, because I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, especially like on the scene in Birmingham, because people want to give off the perception that everything's Chris, you know what I'm saying, everything's nice within our institution, within me and my art and you and your art. You know, I don't want to show you my weak bits, or that they didn't pay me for that gig, but I did it anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all of that ego stuff. I think once you remove all of that and you focus on the art, whether it's good, whether we should be bragging about this to other cities. And also, just a little segue back, I think on the point of like looking at other cities and their infrastructure, and looking at the ways that they are running things, especially looking like up north and like Salford and Manchester and that, I think we have to actually look at the ways that it doesn't work for them, even though they have a system. Because I've spoken to promoters in Manchester, especially through that Eventbrite Connect, where they struggle, and a lot of their issues are coming from bigger promoters with bigger cash taking up space for months and months and months, and they're struggling as small promoters. So I think it's still the same issue about money and corporateness.
Money and corporate. Nick, you were nodding ferociously there.
I'm not sure which bit I was nodding about. I just think this is great stuff, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think there are, you know, just picking up on the venue challenges. One of the things that always sticks in my mind is that across the city, this came up from a conversation about collaborating over ticket sales. Across the city on any night, something like 40% of the tickets which are on sale for events are unsold. And that's across the whole piece. That's including, you know, the arenas, the big hitters, where, you know, shows that go into an arena rarely tank. They normally go in there because the promoter knows they're going to sell out. So there is a, you know, I'm not quite sure what point I'm sort of pulling from that, but it's quite remarkable that, you know, about the level of demand and how we're reaching audiences. That's going to be a perennial challenge, either promoting yourself or, you know, running a venue and promoting other shows. But the point about, I think the thing that, you know, someone who runs 2 big venues can do, to kind of try and articulate the challenges that we have, is trying to make space in our diaries to support young artists, and, you know, to make opportunities for grassroots artists to play in our venues when you're in a kind of in a national ecosystem of promoters and dates and stuff. You know, some of the problems that Nams was just describing about trying to, you know, promoters trying to get dates and venue. You know, I see that from the other side. You know, my organisation's constituted as a charity, and everything that we do goes back into supporting music in the city. But we exist as part of a bigger national kind of ecosystem, which doesn't always give you the kind of freedom to do exactly what you want with the diary. That's a kind of fundamental challenge.
But I could vouch that Town Hall Symphony Hall are doing that, and I'm sure Chicana could as well. We both sit on the youth board for Town Hall Symphony Hall, so I could actually with confidence say that conversation is being had about how to diversify, how to be inclusive with artists that are coming through the city, and they are genuinely trying to find space for that to fit in. But obviously, you know, I'm going to say it because you won the award and it's partly my opinion, but obviously if this is the best music venue in Birmingham and they're doing the best and they're at the top and they're hitting all that quality, that's about the town hall taking some kind of responsibility of what smaller organisations are doing. Someone's got to pimp the conversation, someone's got to lead it, but it's just about making sure that that's done in open forums and done openly and transparently, and also, again, putting the artists right back at the front of the conversation, because they're the ones who are essentially leading it. We're the future. Without us, it doesn't work.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, from, again, artist wise, just to kind of acknowledge where we've come from probably like 5 years ago, just acknowledging, I mean, I know I've worked with Town and Symphony Hall a couple of times, like this year and last year, so I acknowledge that totally, and acknowledge a few other people. But like 5 years ago, for me starting out, even though I'm only down the road in Wolverhampton, I luckily, through my old band, who already had contacts in Birmingham, that was my leeway into Birmingham and into the circles I am in now, which still is a bit restrictive, but that's, again, probably personal choice in the sense, like, you know, my genre is the genre and, like, my interests, etc. So I'd just be curious to what it's like right now as someone who's, you know, doing some open mics or something, and that, you know, they found their passion. They're like, you know what, I want to be an artist. I want to make music. Where do I go?
Any thoughts? Well, let me spin this round in terms of what Nam was saying. So, you know, it seems to me that, you know, you're very clear about the artist's role and the artists at the forefront of everything. I slightly disagree, because I think there are other things that go on that make up the music industries. And I think from the conversation that's taking place across the panel, it would seem, and I'm going to bring this back to the BMC, about the role that some sort of organisation, coalition, trade body, whatever it might be, plays in it. It seems to me that what you're advocating a sort of a link organisation that could actually act as that link between artists and people in across Birmingham to organisations such as the town hall. I know people can do that themselves, but someone have an overarching link that can make those things. And, you know, Adam, who can perhaps identify or signpost people who are making music. So, well, actually, you need to go and speak to, you know, Archim or others. To the other side, where and it's really boring. This is where the separation between art and commerce and economy comes in. The boring side, the BMC also, or whatever, needs to also have an advocacy role. It needs to understand the economic drivers. It needs to understand the issues that affect how, you know, pretty dry policy happens. But the results of that mean the screen and film industries, as we use an exemplar here in the city, you know, do attract. You know, that's why locations come in. That's why Steven Spielberg comes in and films in the city. That's why, you know, money goes back in. That's why screen is suddenly, you know, quite a big industry in the city. That's why Stephen Knight wants to relocate. So you have to practice a marrying up of both aspects, about the artist development, about the links between music, and I know, Lyle, you've used this example before, you know, if the BBC rings up Birmingham, right, you know, sort of crass way, who do they talk to about, you know?
By example, you just.
No, you've often said it before, you know.
It's more about if the Mobos want
or
to.
the Mobos,
relocate,
or the Beat, or the
Brits.
Guardian, whoever. Who do they speak to? Where do they go? And that's about signposting. So perhaps it's both of those. I wonder if that's a better way of framing the discussion.
You know, if I can answer a bit of everything, the Birmingham Music Coalition should be all of those things. Ultimately, the aim of the group is to respond to the needs of the industry, and the industry includes the artists. It's not, you know, I'm doing a lot of legwork around the coalition in forming it and getting the partnerships in place, but essentially it exists because there is a need from these 35 people, and then by default another 200, and then by default, you know, another 10,000 people that work within the industry. These are issues that keep recurring. There are licensing issues that need to be addressed in the city. There are transport issues. There are a lack of managers. There are a lack of agents. With all of these things that have come up across a lot of the panels today. And they can't all be tackled head on at the same time because the funding resources just aren't there. Our infrastructure won't change overnight. We cannot just suddenly magic 25 new agencies, booking agencies, for across the Midlands. What we can do is start to influence the policy and start to think collectively as an entity rather than lots of fragmented businesses with some shared interests. Matt?
I was going to say, one day UMC has like a sort of a community hub. I mean, like the have its own sort of like community walk-in sort of thing, like how these different little sections that this and dealing with that.
With the music museum, maybe.
I think like walk up through the high street and there is the UMC community hub. That'd be awesome.
I mean, it happens in other cities. Matt, it's not a dream. It happens in other cities. And to bring it right back around to Birmingham and its music and its relationship with itself and its cultural identity is, I'm not expecting Brummies to change overnight and be like, you know, shouting about Lady Leisure and that's on the Map's latest release. But I think if we hold more civic pride about our past, our present and our future music, it will filter both downwards and upwards. So you'll get those agencies that we've talked about, the narratives that we've talked about, and we will. Are you biting your lip there?
Yeah, just a little bit. It's only because I had an idea, because I feel like I'm getting that there needs to obviously be some kind of physical thing that happens, and people obviously want a physical space.
Abstract then, I was talking about a will, a desire that will then deliver a physical space, and then it's something that we all share.
And my idea kind of segues, because I think the arbitrary bit is music. That's the vibe. But the space might be something like a festival. And I think obviously stripping it back to the raw meanings of what festival means and celebration and coming together for a period of time to look over or celebrate one thing. So perhaps if it was that, there was a festival that celebrated Birmingham's music scene and industries, where it incorporated all of this 10 to 7 billion people, incorporated all of us, but there was indie rock, there was this Afro twang, which is obviously my genre of music, or alternative jazz music, or there was hip hop, there was grime, and it just encapsulated all of it, but it was not necessarily just for us to network and have that community, but it's actually something that the whole world, that can be marketed globally, like for people to look at, but it's definitely something that's us, like that lineup should be Birmingham, not necessarily bringing in a big name from somewhere else. Obviously we've already got big names from here, but something like that could combat that, as long as the theme behind the festival, or behind whatever that would be, that space, was what we're talking about.
Well, I think there's two things on that, isn't it? Just chair's privilege, as I say, is what, you know, there is a huge event taking place in 3 years' time, where a lot of people will be looking at Birmingham, but also visiting the city, and actually, you know, it will really celebrate the city's diversity, as we mentioned. That's the Commonwealth Games. You know, so there's a job of work for people in this room to make sure that music and music from the city is represented in whatever way that might be. I know discussions are
Have
already
you watched any of the opening ceremonies from other cities?
Yeah.
I think we should all stay out of it.
Well, I thought Danny Balls was brilliant actually at the Olympics, but I do I do understand what you're saying, John. Well,
maybe a fringe event.
Well, there's fringe events, but there's also during. You know, it's not just about the actual opening ceremony. It's also about the music that gets played during it, or fringe events around. You said, and I picked out that point up, John. But the other thing, and I'm going to push you again now, please do come in, is that's really good, but what about in the next 10, 15, 50 years? So I'm talking about sustainability. So festivals, events are great, but actually, how do you think, you know, what are we leaving in place? So in 10, 50 years. I know Brian wants to go in, and the gentleman here, so I'm going to jump to you first for the comment.
Yeah, sure. So me and Xavier here, we're both employees at Town Symphony Hall currently, and we're just at the end of our post now. And we actually worked on Project Soundland Festival, which is a free festival, celebrates Birmingham music. Yeah. My year, I was part of it last year. I've actually guided the group this year, I've been the project manager. And what we faced both years is actually a lack of interest from the city around something like that.
I don't think
there's so many variables for that though.
Yeah.
I mean you can't attribute it to just like apathy. There will be reasons. It will be the way you promoted it, and I know a lot about Soundland, and I think it's promoted quite well, so that's probably not the reason, but you can slice it up any which way.
Sure.
I don't think it's apathy in the city.
And also, what my idea is talking about, I think it would have to be designed with the idea that this is going to be something that's going to continue, and that it's going to be an annual celebratory thing that we do as a city.
Wasn't that Arts Fest?
Yeah, but I wasn't involved in that. So I'm not saying that I need to be involved for it to work. That's not what my point was. But I just mean I wasn't involved in that to know.
What about Weekender?
See, I've got opinions about how that was ran as well and how it was done. Okay. Just from artist perspective in terms of that relationship. But I'm talking about scale and impact as well. It's got to be a numbers thing. I think if everybody co-signs one thing, then the impact is bigger. I think I'm talking like taking up big spaces with large amounts of number.
Who takes artistic direction of this?
I actually don't know. I don't want to be on the panel with like putting out lots of different answers that are solid or confirmed, because that's not what this is about. It's a progressive conversation. I definitely feel like that would be a decision by whoever would co-sign that idea. But I think it's the same thing about what we were saying earlier in the panel about artists and people getting legway in the industry, whether it's venues or whatever it is. Who is co-signing the conversation in the first place? Who's co-signing it now? Because there's difficulties at every end of the spectrum, do you know what I mean?
You're never going to please everyone. I think that's the thing is that...
True.
Sorry, Brian, you
No, I've passed it. I don't know.
We haven't got much time, but let's drill down into that.
I just want to say, I totally understand what James means, and I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's an apathy thing that we're trying to get at. It's so many other things that Lyle's kind of hinted at in what he's working with now. It's not that people can't be bothered to come out in Birmingham, it's that they don't know where to go, they don't know how to get there, they can't get there because the infrastructure's not there, and it's not worth the time when they do get there because they stand in a room that's half empty. There's so many contributing factors, and it's not that the artists don't have direction or that they can't be bothered or anything like that. Birmingham has a very strong identity in certain areas.
Do you know, there's a parallel here. I'm sorry to draw it, but I'm a blues fan, and as a blues fan, you get used to basically getting the shit end of the stick. And after a good few seasons of that, if you get something great, like, you know, if you stay up, or you make it to the later stages of a club, shut up. You know, it's great, and I think Brummies and that self-deprecating thing that culturally, we've got some incredible, you know, the Symphony Hall is such a cultural gem. We've got community projects that are happening all across Birmingham, but we're still used to not having everything. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, I'm trying to articulate this.
But that sounds like culture.
What do you mean?
That sounds like race, the conversation of race, because there's minorities and minorities of people that haven't had things for years and have triumphed and have come on top and have shone through their shit. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the same thing that you do as a city. No?
We shine through our shit.
Yeah.
Slogan of Birmingham now.
Massive.
You get into New Street.
The new
it's
Commonwealth.
like, wow.
Send that to someone. Send that to Andy
Postcards
Street.
like sold.
I mean, as an outsider, I've been in and around Birmingham for 15 years now, but as an outsider, I don't hear that thing about self-deprecation. I'm not sure if it's something that's just like a label that's stuck as a way of...
It's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, it's a sort of self-fulfilling identity, almost. And I think sort of what Nams is saying is, I think it's about, sort of going back to what you said, it's about connections more than anything. It's not, it's there, it's just back to this thing about joining up the dots and making sure that there is this sort of cohesion, or at least an attempt at cohesion, where everything becomes a little bit more self-supporting and then self-prophesising that actually Birmingham, it's not shit. You know, there is something here, and we just need to, I'm not a Brummie, what am I saying, you lot, need to move away from that sort of tired thing about we're self-deprecating. If you keep saying it, it's just going to keep happening.
But can I ask Nick on this question, because you or the town hall certainly sits in cultural partnerships within the city that is, you know, that seeks to link some of the bigger organisations. How does that work? Does it work? Are there lessons for, let's call it popular music in its widest form? Could that work on that scale?
I think one of the challenges is that there is a kind of cultural hierarchy, if you like, and I think that there's access to support infrastructures, funding, and so on. There's a kind of arts cultural language which is understood in some institutions, which means that the whole sector is skewed in one way, and that's not necessarily to the benefit of the grassroots and all that good stuff that happens, you know, in the cracks between the old, let's not even call it high culture, but I'm choosing my words carefully as someone who runs a venue which some people would level the accusation that's a place where old middle class white people go and listen to classical music. Actually, that's patently bollocks in terms of the proportion of our output. But when you struggle with that kind of perception, you become aware of just what a challenge it might be if you are a bedroom producer or promoter to access some of those support networks which are open to people who speak a different cultural language. And I think that's a fundamental challenge. So if you take that, if you acknowledge or accept that that is a kind of tension, you then look at how we better organise as a kind of music community in the city, and how do we then do all the good stuff of getting recognition, how we're important to the local economy, how we drive inward investment, all that kind of stuff. You've then got that kind of thing to do. Then you've got the thing of making sure that kind of policy doesn't drive out all that underground where all the good stuff happens. And that's a danger of, that's potentially what will happen in somewhere like Digbeth.
It's like that thing you want things to change, but when the change actually arrives, it decimates the thing that brought the change in the first place.
It's a bit of a careful what you wish for, because you do see this in cities, that develop and then they try and retrofit Bohemia into an area, and it just doesn't work like that, because you can't.
Well,
just that.
Let me ask, bring your add on this, because not as a DJ, but as the record shop owner, record shops play a hugely important cultural role within music and the city's life, and we're quite poorly served in Birmingham on the whole. So first of all, congratulations for even getting up and doing it. How does this? So we've heard from the artists and the cultural producers, the venues, and from Lyle. And how does this? I knew as soon as I started saying it, it's going to sound really bad. I mean, Lyle.
Tell it like it is.
I never know how to describe it in many hats. But as someone who has a commercial aspect to it, but also cultural, does this kind of conversation resonate with you? Would it? Do you see how it fits into it?
It's quite hard actually, because I operate essentially as an underground artist as well. However successful I might be, I still class myself as that. When you start thinking of official things, it can't just go over your head a little bit, and I find it quite hard to connect with, if I'm honest with you. You know,
And that would that then turn you away, thinking I'm not really interested in it, even though there might be some benefit to you, in a couple of years' time, whether.
Yeah, I mean, from the record shop point of view, I guess it's different. That is a business, but I mean, even that within itself, it's like we've done it by the means of having a cafe there as well. In Birmingham is still very, it is behind with that. It's, for such a big city, it should have a lot more musical outlets. I feel, and I feel that there's also, not just record shops. Doesn't have to be that, but I think that there's a. Berlin's a great example. Whether it's a hair salon or a clothes shop or whatever, they've all got they might have a turntable in there, and people are exposed to music and to and supporting the scene. And I feel that that could be something that is could come into effect in Birmingham a lot more as well. All around the city, outside as well. Selly-Oak, Moseley, whatever. There's all these cool little cafes and things, and independents are opening more, progressive things that are going on, but I don't think that tied in with music at all. And it comes back down to what you were saying about the awareness and, you can put some posters up in there, some flyers and stuff, or something, but generally I think, I think the people in there can be more knowledgeable about what's going on in the scene and provide information to people. You've had people coming from the cafe now that are from Hudson, people from Amsterdam, and they're said to Christy, who works in the shop, what are the top 5 things that we can do around Birmingham, and God, he really struggles to sort of answer. I think that people can be more knowledgeable within the the hubs around the city as well.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Right, 1, 2, 3. So, Christian, then Matt, and then this lady here.
So I'm kind of massively on your wavelength. I think the record shop is a really good example. So just today I've come from Amsterdam.
Okay.
I went a few days ahead of ADE Festival.
Yeah, cool.
Basically to kind of talk with the record store owners to get a sense of their role in ADE.
Yes.
And probably, in fact, every single record store that I went in was doing something for ADE, or had in fact implemented their own agenda.
You know what? I mean, it's sorry to interrupt. It's a great example. I mean, I'm going to ADE. I know it very well, and it's such an example. The whole city is dominated with the yellow signs about ADE, and it's total awareness. You know that weekend in Amsterdam it's ADE.
What is ADE? Sorry.
Amsterdam Dance Event. Yeah, that is right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that that's like the perfect example. It dominates the city, not in a way where it's in your face. It's just it's the biggest event in the city at that time. And if you've got a big event or an event that's supporting the city like what you were saying, that needs to happen. Not just I'm not saying that it was. I don't know how you promoted it, sorry, but it's just it can just be so much more support.
Can I just use this point, Adam, to promote the pivotal showcases that are going to be happening at 6 p.m. From 7 p.m. tonight. So once we've wrapped up this session, we go over to Sterling's for the BPI sponsored networking drinks. It runs from 4 till 6 p.m. So, I mean, my dream would be that Pivotal could do something similar in Birmingham. We've got 3 showcases tonight. We've got Harry Jordan headlining at the Actress and Bishop. We've got Matt from Listening Sessions, Chris from Voyage Events, and Alex from The Unspeakable doing a whole showcase, and the after party, the Pivotal after party at Sterling's. And we've also got Juice Salim and Lady Sanity headlining at RJJZ's. It's not a simple model, it is a simple model to do, and exponentially year on year it can grow. That's a fairly easy
it just needs to start.
It has to start somewhere, Okay.
That's the Dublin Music Week that we thought about. Chris, had you finished?
So I was basically just saying, because it's something that's actually quite easy to implement, like you said, just something as simple as having a DJ set in cafe, and you live stream it, people start to see it. It's literally that easy, and there just seems to a certain extent be a bit of a disconnect between people who are involved in the music and then people that are involved in the other stuff. But these things can work together. That it's very much prevalent in Amsterdam. It feels more like an ecosystem, whereas I feel like Birmingham is finding its feet, but it's not quite connecting the dots yet. But I think it is getting there, and there are very simple changes that can be made to make that happen.
Matt? that Matt, sorry.
Yeah, this idea of connecting the dots, and also someone said earlier about they come to Brum but they don't know where to go, the rest of it. Like when I came to Brum, that was my main motivation. It was like adventure, finding all these different things. But that's just me, because like that's what I love. That's why I do what I do, sort of thing. But however, people who are busy and the rest of them might not have that sort of like deep down drive to discover it. And then linking back to the connecting the dots, you could through BMC just be like, let's have a campaign connecting different elements, like different communities. I think Brum is sort of very much like that. There are pockets of communities that do great things, but within their pockets. And how about you go, okay, we're just going to do a campaign that's like, shout about Brum as much as you possibly can. Here's the hashtag, here's like the umbrella sort of thing. Everyone's just going to go, yes,
taking notes here.
Pushing Birmingham as much as you can, and let's see which of you, like communities, which of you pockets can shout about it the most, and then it's like a team.
I think that there's definitely
together you can all shout about it as much, all as sort of one voice, and then it's like the camaraderie, and you know, it's sort of like bringing everyone together like they're one team. I think that's something we need.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, you know, you could have something where, you know, there was an event in Leeds recently where there was called Inner City Electronics, where all of the venues across the city all were open for, it was just a one-day thing, you know, but you could have like, it's just about, I guess, the venues playing the game as well. I know there's like a lack of venues in Birmingham, but there's still loads of venues, you know, and you know, you could have a real sort of, you know, series across the board, you know, music event that's going on from the town hall to, you know, to wherever, you know, to some of the smaller pubs, but it's all focused around one event, you know, and it's just the whole of the city's open for one day, a little bit like what AD is, like what you're saying. Obviously that's over 4 or 5 days, but you know, I've not seen that done in the city before, you know, and I think that would just link everything in together, the venues, the licensing, everyone would know what's going on, you know, and you know, that would be a way of bringing it all together, I guess.
Oh, hold on. I've got this lady first. How long have we got?
It kind of links on to what everyone's been saying.
Sorry.
It kind of links on to what everyone's been saying. It's that cohesion between, it's not just down to the artist to promote what they're doing, it's down to the venue, it's down to everyone that's kind of involved in it. But I think it's not just about promoting what's in Birmingham, it's making people want to come to Birmingham, and within the genre I play, people avoid Birmingham. Yeah, I went to a fantastic event at the Institute last night with a touring artist. She was phenomenal and it was a packed out room. But there's a lot of artists that don't come to Birmingham, so I think it's important to be able to create something that brings, so we host our own night, we bring artists to us that we want to see in Birmingham, and we give them a platform where they see there's an audience, and then we hope they might do the same for us in their home city. And I think it's important to actually be inviting artists from outside of the city to see, wow, there is actually an audience in Birmingham, more than just showing what we have here to who we have here.
And what was your genre, sorry?
I play kind of country music, more the Americana kind of sector, but
I'm just there's Matt and Sam, and then now I'll give you the last word from the panel.
So just a really quick thing, I've just had a reminder come up on my phone saying, as from tonight, there's a 3-day music festival, free, in multiple venues across this particular city, multiple genres, okay, and it's in Worcester. Worcester, for fuck's sake. If they can do it, why can't Birmingham?
I'm there tomorrow playing, so if anyone wants to come.
Well flubbed.
Sorry, I spoke earlier because I'm from Leeds, sort of doing similar things you're talking about. If you want to make a couple of quick points, you mentioned about Amsterdam Dance Event. Well, I've just come from an event that the guys who founded the Night Mayor's office in Amsterdam put together, and I think the idea that you're talking about, I think that reinforces, some of the ideas around the BMC, that there seems to be some scepticism around, and I think it's right that there's scepticism and that's explored. But I think you talked about the simplicity of all this stuff that's integrated with the Amsterdam Dance Event. It feels simple, but it's absolutely not. I mean, they took, I think it was 4 years, Merrick, who set the Night Mayor's office up, that he worked 2 days a week unpaid and kind of forced his way into City Hall, and that's happening all the time. And the same thing they talked about in Berlin with the Club Commission. But the other interesting thing about those models is they're almost entirely dance music based, and you're talking so much about the benefit and the diversity of the scene. And I just want to make another point about the assets we have in Birmingham, because it's great. I spoke at an event called Levitate, 4 years ago around this, is you mentioned Inner City Electronic, and that was a great event. But the probably better example in Leeds that does that connectivity is an indie rock pop festival called Live at Leeds.
Yeah.
Now, what we have in Leeds with those two events is they're dominated by quite big promoters in the city. Now, what's clear from today is that you either don't have that, and you have a real strength of independence, or that they're not involved in this conversation.
A bit of both.
A bit of both.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is it's not necessarily great if you had that and you had one dominant conversation. Everything that happens in Leeds is dominated by 2 or 3 really dominant promoters. And it's at the exclusion of stuff like, you know, a symphony hall or something like that. What you seem to have here is a conversation with a really rich range of like participants.
That was partly the driver behind BMC was to bring those disparate and perhaps very fragmented voices together, because we, you know, as an industry body, we need to be able to represent classical right through to glitchy 140 stuff and everything in between. So, I'm not saying that it's all rosy in the you know, the promotion garden in Birmingham, because there's competitive agendas like anywhere, but I think there are more people willing to collaborate on such a model now than ever before.
All right, last word to them.
Yeah, it was nice really, because my point was about culture, and I guess culture of the music, but also culture of the people involved in it. I think to make sure that it's something that's true to the word diverse, I think it has to reflect the different cultures of music. But going even deeper than that, I can't remember who I was talking to today. Someone was showing me an app. I can't remember right now, but basically the app was literally going to show the whole artist's merch. To have all their merch, you could sell their tickets from their app, would say all about who they were, and their fans paid a small fee a month to get access to that. But within that, the artist could then work out the algorithms of that fan and work out a little bit more detail about who they were and what they like to do, probably even find out what time they use their phone. But I think it's that detailed in the culture, because I think it goes beyond genre of music into who that person is, where they live, their constituency, all these red tape stuff that the funding applications are trying to get, like their postcode and are they a NEET, are they a not, all this other stuff. Like that's actually what we need to do, but just within the music, but maybe have different names that don't sound like NEET.
Okay, thank you. That was a good way to end the panel. I would say that do speak to Lyle and myself and others about the things we've talked about. Get involved and learn more, find out more about the BMC. I think the idea is it's an open and for you to help shape it. I think, you know, what's the strongest thing that's probably come out is this idea of some sort of event, and I'll push out again and speak to Lyle, and I respect to Nick about, you know, quite an easy thing around Birmingham Music Week where you don't actually do anything other than you're already doing, and you just badge it and you grow that year on year, and I think that's a fairly simple way of kickstarting something. But there's obviously a real desire in the room, and it seems to me there's an opportune time, or it's very timely for these types of discussions to carry on. And I said to someone outside, oftentimes in these types of events, the best things and the best conversations happen in the bar or outside. So please do stay around and have a drink, chat to people, get cards, etc. Come to the events tonight, and you know, through your activities, your continual activities, you know, let's in the words of the great Mike Skinner, the Brummie, let's push things forward. So thanks a lot. Cheers.
Nice touch, mate.
Did you like that? That was fucking great.